You are looking at a live view of the Falcon 9 as it awaits its targeted 9:56 a.m. Eastern Time launch from Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida. Good morning. It's November 11th here at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. My name is Lauren Lyons, and I'm an engineer on the Starlink team here at SpaceX. In honor of Veterans Day, we would like to take a moment to express our deepest gratitude to all our veterans at SpaceX and to those across the country who have served. Thank you for all that you've done and all that you continue to do. Every launch is an exciting launch, but today's launch represents some particularly notable milestones for SpaceX. First, today's launch will be the first time we're reflying a Falcon 9 booster for the fourth time. This booster previously flew on Iridium 7, Salcom 1A, and PSN 6. Following today's flight, we'll be attempting to recover it for a fourth time on our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, out in the Atlantic Ocean. Second, this is the first time we'll be flying a recovered fairing. This fairing previously flew on the Falcon Heavy Arabsat mission earlier this year. And last but not least, of course, we'll be launching another 60 Starlink satellites to orbit. These 60 new satellites will make Starlink one of, if not the largest satellite constellation to date. We'll talk more about these new satellites later on in the webcast. Lots of exciting stuff going on for today's mission, but let's take a closer look at Falcon 9 on the pad. Right now we are looking at a live view of Falcon 9, our 70-meter two-stage liquid-fueled launch vehicle. The bottom two-thirds of the vehicle is the first stage, and this is what accelerates the vehicle through the Earth's atmosphere to the edge of space with the help of 9 Merlin engines. Today we're going to be flying this first stage for a fourth time and also attempting its fourth recovery on our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, which is currently stationed about 340 nautical miles northeast of the Cape, off the coast of Charleston, South Carolina. Above the first stage is the second stage, which has a single Merlin vacuum or MVAC engine, and that engine ignites after the first stage separates. The second stage is what will carry the Starlink satellites to an altitude of 280 kilometers above the Earth's surface. And from there, over the course of the next few weeks, the satellites will use their onboard Krypton propulsion system to move up to their operational altitude of 550 kilometers. Now, the stack of those 60 Starlink satellites is safely tucked away inside the 17-foot diameter payload fairing, which is that part at the very top. Once we reach the vacuum of space, we will jettison the fairing as the second stage continues on its journey to orbit. And as I mentioned earlier, we are flying our very first reuse fairing, which is super cool because this is the first time anyone that we're aware of has ever attempted to refly a fairing. And for those of you who follow us, you know we've been working towards this milestone for a while, so we're super excited to finally try it. Now, we're not going to attempt to catch the fairing halves today as originally planned because the team had some concerns about stress to the ships in high seas prior to launch, but we're planning to retrieve the halves once they splash down in the ocean. So again, there's lots of activity today, so let's check in with Jessie for a status update.
My name is Jessie Anderson, and I'm a lead manufacturing engineer here at SpaceX. All is looking good for an on-time launch of today's exciting Starlink mission. Falcon 9 rolled out to the pad with the payload last night and went vertical this morning. The chief engineer held a technical poll at T-1 hour, and the launch director held a propellant load and launch go-no-go poll at T-38 minutes. Falcon 9 has been loading propellant since T-35 minutes, and currently our rocket-grade kerosene, or what we call RP-1, is nearly fully loaded on the first stage, and the second stage is already fully loaded. Liquid oxygen loading is currently underway on both stages. At T-7 minutes, engine chill will begin. This is where we allow a small amount of the super chilled liquid oxygen to flow into the Merlin engine turbo pumps prior to the full flow of liquid oxygen into the vehicle to avoid any shocks to the system. Finally, at T-4.5 minutes, the transporter erector will retract away from the rocket slightly, and that'll provide clearance for Falcon 9 to lift off of the launch pad. As for the spacecraft, the Starlink satellites remain powered down until just after separation from the second stage, which will occur roughly an hour after liftoff. If you watched our first satellite launch, then you may recall that the Starlink satellites are stacked flat on top of each other and then are released simultaneously during payload deploy, followed by orbit raising. Prior to orbit raise, SpaceX engineers will conduct data reviews to ensure the Starlink satellites are operating as intended. As we noted prior to the launch, we're keeping an eye on one of the satellites that may not orbit raise. If for any reason a satellite is not performing as expected, SpaceX will deorbit the spacecraft. The components of each satellite are fully demisable and are expected to quickly burn up in the Earth's atmosphere, a measure that exceeds all current safety standards. Once the health checkouts are complete, the satellites will then use their onboard ion thrusters, powered by krypton, to propel themselves to an altitude of 350 kilometers. Now let's take a look at the weather. And it looks like we have some great weather this morning over there in Cape Canaveral. There's a very small chance of showers and some clouds with only a 20% chance of launch violation. So we will continue to monitor this all the way down to T-0 to ensure that the weather remains good for launch, but it's looking great over there. The Air Force range is prepared to support today's mission. Waters are clear of any ships and the range continues to ensure the safety of our launch. We are continuing to count down to liftoff, but if for any reason we do have to call a hold on today's launch, we have a backup opportunity tomorrow, November 12th at 9:34 a.m. Eastern Time. But at this time, all systems are go for an on-time liftoff, approximately 8 minutes from now.
So for those of you who don't already know, Starlink is SpaceX's effort to bring high-speed, low-latency broadband internet to people across the globe, particularly to areas where connectivity has been unreliable, too expensive, or completely unavailable. Most satellite internet services today come from geostationary satellites, and those are single satellites that orbit the planet at about 35,000 kilometers, covering a fixed region above the Earth. Starlink is a constellation of multiple satellites that orbit the planet at about 550 kilometers and cover the entire globe. And because they're in such a low orbit, the round-trip data time between the user and the satellite, also known as latency, is much faster than with satellites that are in geostationary orbit. Additionally, each satellite performs autonomous collision avoidance maneuvers throughout its lifetime so that they don't run into each other to create space debris. This is the first constellation to have this advanced capability. In addition, each satellite is fully demisable, meaning at the end of life, the satellite's components are expected to burn up in the Earth's atmosphere. Low Earth orbit satellite constellations at this scale are incredibly difficult to build, but the performance of those initial 60 satellites that we launched back in May has been very promising. In fact, just a couple weeks ago, Elon sent a tweet using the Starlink network for the first time. We still have a ways to go from tweets to 4K cat videos, but we are on our way. Our goal is to start offering service in the northern United States and Canada as soon as next year, expanding to a global constellation after an expected 24 launches. Now, the team responsible for this enormous task is largely based in Redmond, Washington. The Redmond team, along with their counterparts across the company, there they are. Look at our team. Hi, guys. The Redmond team, along with their counterparts across the company, have implemented a number of upgrades for today's mission, including doubling the number of steerable phased array broadband beams, a 400% increase in data throughput per satellite, and the inclusion of a new Ka-band antenna system. Between the satellite upgrades, the first reflight of a fairing today, and this being the first fourth flight of a Falcon 9, there's a ton of cool stuff happening on today's mission, with liftoff just a few minutes from now.
Currently 4.5 minutes from liftoff, Falcon 9 is moving into the final stages of the countdown. The first and second stages are both nearly fully loaded with 1 million pounds of kerosene fuel and liquid oxygen. First stage should finish propellant loading at T-3 minutes and second stage at T-2 minutes. At T-60 seconds, be sure to listen in to the call out for Falcon 9 in startup. This means that the rocket's autonomous internal flight computers have taken over the launch countdown. The Starlink payloads continue to be healthy. The Falcon 9 team is tracking no issues on the rocket. Weather is still looking amazing, and the range is green for launch. So let's go listen in to the countdown.
to unlock, so let's close down. Stage 2 lock load is closed down. Vehicle's on internal power. Falcon 9 is in startup.
LD is go for launch.
T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition, liftoff. With gratitude to our veterans today and always, go USA.
Falcon 9 is pitching downrange.
Stage 1 process nominal.
Power and telemetry is nominal.
We are T plus 55 seconds into launch, and we've had a on-time liftoff and a beautiful view of the Falcon 9 vehicle making its way to orbit. We are coming up in about 10 seconds here on max Q. That is the maximum aerodynamic pressure that the vehicle will see during ascent. We should be able to hear that call out.
Vehicle's experiencing maximum aerodynamic pressure.
And there's that call out for max Q. Coming up next is a rapid succession of events, starting off with main engine cutoff, or what we call MECO, followed immediately by stage separation. That's the separation of the first stage from the second stage. And then seconds after will be the lighting of our second stage engine, which we call second engine startup, or SES-1. That is coming up here in about 45 seconds.
And back engine chill.
And we've got a great view this morning with some pretty clear blue skies, the Earth in the background. And if you're just now joining us, we are 30 seconds away from main engine cutoff, stage separation, and SES-1. What you see on your screen, you should be able to see the stages separate. About 10 seconds here.
Nico.
Stage separation confirmed.
There, as you saw on your left screen, we had Nico and stage separation. On your right screen, we should see that second engine startup. And there's that second stage engine glowing bright red. Coming up next in about 30 seconds is fairing deployment. Now a reminder, this fairing is being flown for a second time, which is a first in SpaceX history. And what you can see on your screen, on the left screen, those grid fins have been deployed. And there is our fairing deployment. This is the first reflight of our fairing, so such an exciting mission this morning already.
As the second stage continues to orbit with those 60 Starlink satellites on top, stage one is making its way home for the fourth time. Now, stage one is going to execute 2 burns before hopefully it's standing there on our drone ship. The first one will be the entry burn, which occurs at about T plus 6 minutes and 23 seconds, so a little over 2 minutes from now. That's where we're going to relight 3 of those Merlin engines and slow the vehicle down such that it can safely re-enter the atmosphere. From there, the booster will coast for just under a minute and a half and then execute what is called the landing burn. That is where we're going to reignite a single engine, that E9 engine right in the middle of the booster, slowing the vehicle down to 0 velocity, hopefully standing right there up on the drone ship. Meanwhile, stage 2 continues to fly nominally. We're hearing that MVAC-D power is nominal and continues at full power. Stage 2 pressures, the tank pressures are nominal as well.
First and second stage are on a nominal trajectory.
We're just over a minute away from that entry burn. Meanwhile, stage 1 continues to make its way down. That MVAC engine is powering that second stage in those satellites with 250,000 pounds of thrust. Okay, we're coming up in about 20 seconds on that entry burn. You should be able to see that on the left side of your screen. Meanwhile, stage 2 continues to burn nominally.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
Stage 1 entry burn.
And as you see, that entry burn has begun. Should go for another 5 seconds or so.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
As you just heard, we had a successful shutdown of that entry burn. So for about another minute and a half, stage 1 is going to coast, making its way down to the drone ship. And at
First and second stage continue to follow a nominal trajectory.
And in just under a minute, that landing burn should start.
Stage 1 transonic.
Everything continues to be nominal in stage 2. And in just under 10 seconds, that landing burn should start. Hopefully we'll get some nice on-vehicle video.
Stage 1 landing burn.
We don't have that video just yet, but that landing burn has started.
Second stage is entered terminal guidance.
Stage 1 landing weight deployed.
It looks like we're not going to get video on the way down. Oh, but we have the drone ship. And wow. The Falcon has landed for the 4th time. Amazing. These boosters are designed to be used 10 times. Let's turn it around for a 5th, guys. Wow. 4th landing. That is super cool. So stage 2, I believe, we have Petsiko 1. We're going to enter a coast phase. Before we do that, we're going to take a quick break. Sorry, it's very exciting over here. And as we leave, we're going to have an animation that shows you where we are in the coast phase. But we're going to be back here at T plus 44 minutes. All right, we'll be back at T plus 44 minutes for a second stage relight, followed up by payload deploy. So come on back.
expected by Charlie. False signal expected, go nearly. signal reached.
welcome back to the webcast for Starlink. We are having a little trouble with the video on board the vehicle, but we are still getting telemetry, so you may see that video cut in and out a little bit right now. But so far we've had a on-time liftoff, completed the first reflight of a fairing, the first time that we've flown and landed a first stage booster, and we also did confirm nominal insertion or good orbit of the second stage. So coming up next is SES-2 in about 20 seconds from now, and this will be the shortest SES we've ever had, lasting just about 1 second. It's a short burn because the deployment orbit for these satellites isn't much different than our initial parking orbit, so we just need a quick burn to get us there. We're waiting for that SES-2 and SECO-2. It's going to be very quick.
And back ignition.
And there it is. And second engine cutoff is complete. Waiting to hear for good orbit. Should hear that call out in a few seconds.
Nominal orbit insertion for satellite deploy.
And there is the confirmation of good orbit. Now that we're in a good orbit, we'll be coasting for the next 15 minutes or so. So we will be back around T+1 hour for the exciting payload deployment of our Starlink satellites.
Welcome back to the webcast for Starlink. We are getting very close to deployment of those 60 Starlink satellites. Now, after deployment, the satellites will appear to be kind of clumped together, but that's totally normal. As you can probably imagine, 60 separate separation systems is super inefficient. It adds mass, it adds complexity, and therefore it adds cost. Instead, we deploy them all at once, allowing them to slowly disperse from one another, and to do so without the use of complex mechanisms. They might even bump into one another, which, if that happens, is totally okay. The satellites were designed with this possibility in mind. All right, we lost the video just there, but let's listen in and see if we have any word on the deployment.
Starlink tension rod release confirmed.
And as you just heard, we have confirmation that the tension rods have been released. Let's see if we can get some video of that. That would be really awesome. There we go. Now, as they make their way off, next they'll start to slowly drift apart and then deploy their singular solar array pointed at the sun to begin charging their batteries. And over the course of the coming weeks, the satellites will use their onboard ion propulsion systems to raise their orbit to 550 kilometers, align into their orbital planes, and properly space themselves out to providing internet coverage on Earth. And with that, that brings us to the end of our webcast for today. So to recap, we had a successful fourth launch of a booster and a successful landing of that same booster. We reflew a fairing successfully for the first time. Both of those things are pretty cool, but also cool, you just saw we deployed 60 more Starlink satellites. This puts us one step closer to being able to offer Starlink internet service to customers across the globe, including people in rural and hard-to-reach places who have struggled for access to high-speed internet.
Thank you to the 45th Space Wing for range safety, the FAA for licensing today's launch, as well as the FCC for licensing our first operational Starlink satellites. We'd like to thank all of our viewers for tuning in, and again, our deepest gratitude to all of our veterans, both here at SpaceX and across the country. Follow our website and social media platforms for updates on our next missions and milestones. And until next time, I hope you all have a great morning just like we did.